I started to get interested in cruises just a few weeks ago. My boyfriend loves cruises and has tried to get me interested in going on one, but until now I told him that cruises were for old people that didn't know how to travel. When I think of traveling, I think of sweat, stress, and excitement. It seems that travel should entail a bit of hard work to reap the reward of being able to see some of the world's greatest sights and live unforgettable adventures. Well, all of this was true until I started exploring the world of cruising. I now think that I have started to understand what all the fuss is about. Cruises are like little planets. There are enough activities to keep you occupied for weeks on end for all ages and at all different intensity levels. The routes they take are fascinating, and personally I have set my eyes on a 7-night cruise that goes from Venice to Greece, Turkey, and Croatia, and then back to Venice. Once I started researching cruises, I found that there were some very appealing aspects. First of all, the cost per night is quite reasonable, taking into account that on a regular trip you would have to pay for food, accommodation, and transport from place A to place B separately. I should just add here that I am of course talking about the cheapest rooms, which are the interior rooms without a porthole. Secondly, I never realized that regular cruise lines went to such interesting cultural destinations. For instance, after I take my imaginary cruise to Turkey, of course, I would then go on to explore Asia and then the Baltic Seas. This fascinating cruise that I am thinking about going on is part of the Royal Caribbean International's fleet. They are really well known right now in the travel industry because they have just launched the biggest cruise ship ever built, the Allure of the Seas. I'd now like to tell you some facts about this behemoth of a vessel. She is 362 meters long and weighs 225,000 tons. Just to give you an idea of what these figures mean, the Eiffel Tower is 60 meters shorter, and the ship weighs what 3 empty Boeing 747s weigh. On board there are 2,384 crew, 4 pools, 10 whirlpools, a surf simulator, 14 restaurants, a Starbucks, a zip line, not 1 but 2 rock climbing walls, an ice skating rink, a fitness center, the Broadway musical Chicago, a casino, a dance studio, and the list goes on and on. She is a fabulous vessel and dwarfs all other cruise ships. Now, you might be interested in knowing how the engineers and architects were able to build such a large cruise ship. To tell you more about how the Allure was built, we have to go back in time. People have been traveling by sea since the dawn of time. We only have to think back to the Vikings or Christopher Columbus to see that it's been around for a long time, but back then boats were not used for tourism and they weren't very speedy. Thomas Newcomen changed all that in 1712 when he invented the steam engine. As the steam engine evolved, so did its uses, until in 1819 the first American ship aided by a steam engine crossed the Atlantic Ocean. The SS Savannah left from the U.S. city bearing its name on May 22, 1819, and arrived in Liverpool, England 29 days later. While the SS Savannah only used its steam engine for approximately 85 hours, which represented about 12% of the total time of the trip, the voyage made history and the era of the steamship began. The passenger ship industry then flourished in the late 1800s and early 1900s thanks to the invention of this steam engine and to the growing number of immigrants embarking on the American dream. Indeed, transatlantic ocean liners during that time were used by hundreds of thousands of poor immigrants headed for Staten Island with a view to eventually becoming American citizens. First-class passengers, however, started traveling by steamliner to go on holiday as well, but of course back then they did not benefit from all the modern comforts that exist on today's cruise ships. In 1849, an ambitious British shipping company, White Star Lines, began building the first fleet of ocean liners in 1849 and would revolutionize transatlantic passage for the next 60 years. White Star set records in terms of size and grandeur. It built, amongst others, and I'm sure that you've heard of these ships, 3 large ships called the Olympic, the Britannic, and the Titanic. They were the cream of the crop at the time in terms of luxury and comfort. However, as the airplane grew more popular, traveling by ship grew less popular. People could fly to more destinations in much less time. Shipping companies had to change tactic and started to change their business model to focus more on tourism than on passenger transportation. In 1900, the American Hamburg Company built the first ship specifically designed for cruises. The Princess Victoria Line was 124 meters long and weighed 4,409 gross tons. An interesting fact is that during the early 1930s, Adolf Hitler helped the fledgling cruise industry by offering holiday packages to German workers. This was part of a state-sponsored effort to unite the nation. Hitler eventually commissioned several new ships for German workers, thus making the Nazi Party the early pioneers of the cruise ship industry. Cruising, as we know it now, has really started not that long ago, in fact, in the 1980s. There have been many changes since then. There are now cruises for all types of audiences, from honeymooners to gay cruises, to nudist cruises, to children's cruises, such as the Disney Cruise Lines. There are many more destinations offered and activities on board, as well as excursions at the various ports of call. Of course, there are some problems with cruise lines as well. There have been many headline-catching stories lately involving cruise ships. I'm sure you'll all have heard, for instance, of the Costa Concordia, which is still currently on its side near the coastline of Giglio Island in Italy. I'm sure you'll also have heard of the Carnival Triumph, which recently was stranded at sea because of a complete electrical failure. There are, of course, all sorts of disaster stories about cruise ships that we've heard about. But these are not the most serious problems. The most serious problem is their detrimental impact on the environment. Just like airplanes, cruise ships are huge polluters. Emitted pollution comes in the form of biological material, human waste, exhaust emissions, cleaning products, and sound pollution. It's up to you to decide whether or not you want to go on a cruise. But I have to say that in my case, after watching so many appealing videos on YouTube, I'm sold and hope to embark soon.